I believe we are ready when you are, Mr. Warden.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call, please?
Sure, I can confirm that all members are in attendance today with the exception of Counselor Body, and Counselor Marion Kepke is attending in his place.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Before we begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation, the people of the Three Fires, known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. And further, we give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, known collectively as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the traditional keepers of these lands and waters since time immemorial. To our south lies the traditional territories of the Six Nations of the Grand River and the Haudenosaunee. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and friendship with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Is there any declaration, excuse me, of interest related to any matter on today's council agenda? Seeing none, if one should arise during the course of the meeting, you can, of course, declare it at that time. The first item of business is adoption of the minutes. We have the County Council and Committee of the Whole minutes dated July 25th of this year. Someone care to move receiving of those minutes? Councillor Eccles and Councillor McKay. Any discussion? All those, sorry, Mr. Eccles, did you, no, you're good. Okay. Is anyone opposed to that motion? That is carried. Thank you very much. The next set of minutes is the Long-Term Care Committee of Management minutes dated July 23rd and the various resolutions contained therein. That will be moved by Councillor Hutchison and seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? Is anyone opposed? That is carried. The final set of minutes is the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Planning Task Force dated July 25th and the resolutions contained therein. Moved by Councillor Keaveney, seconded by Councillor Bourdignon. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. We have no closed meeting matters in council this morning. There are no reports. We simply have a bylaw to, I guess it's a bylaw to amend bylaw 5073. Just let me read it. That way everybody knows what it is. The bylaw 5193-24 and 5196-24 be introduced and be taken as a read, a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the warden and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. And the two bylaws are, the first one is to authorize an amended and restated agreement between the corporation of the County of Grey and the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. And the second bylaw is the confirming bylaw that will confirm all actions and proceedings of the council. Councillor DeBreen will move that. Councillor Nielsen will second. Discussion. Councillor Eccles.
This bylaw, we had discussion a little while ago, and I'm not certain that I saw anything in there dealing with tree marking or the request from Grey Sauble. Is that in this bylaw?
Randy, please, or who wants to?
Yeah. Through you, Warden Milne, yes, that is in this proposed bylaw. That would be Grey Sauble Conservation Authority would be allowing tree marking on private lands on a trial basis to the end of the current contract. With that, my understanding is that they had discussions at their Conservation Authority board with respect to this matter. I think there's understanding and support from the council board, but based on what I heard and received. In terms of this, as noted previously, this is something that exists already for Grey Sauble. They provide these services in Bruce County. And this just confirms then that they were able to provide those services like any other business can provide those services in Grey County as well.
Thank you, Randy. Scott, I see your hands up, or Scott Taylor. I'll ask if he wants to chime in there.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Through you, I just wanted to know, in addition to what Randy said, we do have a representative from Grey Sauble with us today, Gloria Dangerfield. So certainly county staff are happy to answer any questions that council may have. And if we do choose to hear from Grey Sauble staff, Gloria is with us today as well to try to answer any questions or provide any clarification back to council before a decision is made.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Okay, now to Councillor Greig, please.
Thank you.
Ready to go.
Through you, Warden, to the concerns of our fellow councillor, I hope it does alleviate your concerns that the board did have a thorough report at the July board meeting, and the return to previous service provision created no objections or concerns from any of the board members of the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. So we were happy moving forward in support of the bylaw that's before County Council today.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Greig. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the Councillor Eccles.
So I guess further to Councillor Greig and Director Taylor, that this is allowing the Conservation Authority, a publicly funded, taxpayer funded organization, to be competing in the with private sector companies that are quite obviously paying the taxes and funding a company that is going to be competing against them. Am I far off of that point?
I'm going to ask CAO Wingrove to respond, and then Councillor Greig.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Warden, and I certainly don't want to speak over top of Councillor Greig, but I would say it is my understanding, as has been earlier mentioned, that Grey Sauble has been providing this service along with many others for a long time now. Certainly, our conservation authorities are not in a financial position to be offering any service on a subsidized basis, and I would go so far as, given the structure that they operate under and the costs that they bear, that they're unlikely to be the low cost provider of these services. So I'm not sure that the data exists to support the fact that the Conservation Authority would be in a position to undercut any existing businesses when it comes to providing the tree marking service. It would be my sense that people choose to use the Conservation Authority to provide this service because they value perhaps the process and the approach that the Conservation Authority takes to tree marking.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Greig, did you want to respond?
I was just going to quickly say, and there are two other board members as members of County Council probably joining here today as well. But to the concerns of the councillor, municipal tax levy is not funding that service being provided that we're discussing here today. Yes, the revenues do go back into that department, but we are not operating in any such way that there's a subsidy. And that type of information was in the report, which we had in July, and left the board members all feeling comfortable.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? Councillor Eccles is opposed. I will declare that carried. Okay, thank you very much for that discussion. Any news and celebrations? Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden Neil. Sorry, just wanted to let everybody know that on August the 25th, we'll be having a Markdale Jubilee celebration. Part of the festivities will be having Grey Highlands Council compete against Markdale residents in a Markdale trivia contest. But part of the contest is to progressively eat hotter and spicier chicken wings. So if anybody wants to see Grey Highlands Council's lips burning and on fire. Come on out to the Markdale Arena on Sunday, the 25th of August. I think it's 12:30 that's starting, but there's festivities all day long. But I just thought the rest of County Council be entertained by the County Council members' burning lips.
Yeah, there's so much you could say, but I'm not going to. Okay, any other good news and celebration? Councillor Eccles.
Tough to say this, but we're getting into fall fair season. And coming up just shortly is the Benedict Brandt Hanover Fall Fair, August, I just forgot, 14th, 15th, that weekend. And then the Durham Fall Fair will be before its council meeting August 30th, 31st, and September 1st, 2024. As well as coming up is the Elmwood, which the larger proportion of Elmwood is in Grey County. Elmwood Homecoming is on that September 1st weekend as well too. A lot of activities going on out at the community center, which of course we split with Bruce County and even more so with the municipality of Brockton. Fun and festive and reminiscing from that portion of Grey County in West Grey.
Thank you,
Look
sir.
forward to seeing everybody there.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden Milne, and good morning, County Council again. I am just pleased to let everyone know that the Grey County Truck Show is being held this weekend at the Dundalk Fairgrounds. It's being held Saturday and Sunday during the day, as well as Saturday evening. There's a band and festivities that way. And since we won't be meeting before the end of August, I'd like to remind everyone that the Hopeville Kite Festival is making its return to Hopeville on August 24 and 25, down on Grey Road 9, just around Southgate Road 15 area. So be sure to check them out at flyhopeville.ca. And I apologize, my dogs have decided to chime in too. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Councillor Deckard.
Thank you, Warden Milne, and good morning. And on Councillor Eccles' coattails here, just wanted to promote the Hanover Fair, and it's not a fall fair. We're not trying to rush the season too much here. So lots of activities going on with the crier competition, baby show, and inflatables, lots of things for the kids to do. And car show starts tomorrow night, and should be a full weekend, and look forward to anybody that's looking for something to do this weekend. Come and join us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Warren. Anyone else? Seeing nothing else. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Warden, and good morning, everyone. Speaking of fall fairs, the Desborough Fall Fair will be happening on the Labor Day weekend, and it is one of the best agricultural fall fairs in all of Grey County. So I hope everyone can come out to Desborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any others. I have a motion to adjourn. Someone care to move? Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Nielsen. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? That is carried. So we'll just take a minute and to allow Olivia to switch us over to Committee of the Whole.
You are good to go.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. We'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting of August 8th of this year to order. Is there any declaration of interest related to any item on this agenda this morning? Not seeing any. If one should arise, you can, of course, declare it at that time. Any business? I don't believe there's any business arising from the minutes. Nope. We have a delegation this morning. We have Kate Burns Gallagher. She's the Executive Director of the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, and she's going to making a presentation this morning regarding the 2024-25 strategic priorities of the Western Ontario Wardens. Welcome, Kate. Good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you, Warden. And through you to County Council, it's a pleasure to be here today. I will be giving you an update on our 2024-2025 strategic priorities. So those priorities that we're going to be heading to AMO here with in the next 2 weeks. So a real nice overview of the organization, just to touch base quickly on that, and then those key priorities. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I give you the right screen here. Just let me know if we're looking okay.
Yeah, looks good, Kate.
Good. Thank you, Warden. Okay, so who is the Western Ontario Warrens Caucus, or the WOWC as we affectionately call ourselves? We are those 15 upper and single tier municipalities in Western Ontario, 300 communities, 117 municipalities. That's really key. We represent 26% of the municipalities in Ontario, more than 1.6 million residents. And when we were talking to Minister Flack this week, he noted that's a significant portion of the population of the province as well. So he even realized that, which was fantastic. And really the key to our caucus is we are 90% rural. That's really the glue that binds us together, and is a huge portion of our advocacy, is that rural piece, our small rural communities. And the purpose of the organization is for us to all work together. As I mentioned, those 117 municipalities, the 15 counties, there's strength in those numbers, the political municipal power of those municipalities, 26% of the province. And when we work together, we can affect great change. And I'll talk about some of those accomplishments that we've made in the past 18 months at the conclusion of the presentation. But that is why, that's the purpose, that's our why, because when we work together, we can see great change. How do we operate? We operate with our caucus, so we are represented by the wardens and through the 15 counties, so well represented by Warden Milne. Then we are supported by our CAO, so with CAO Wingrove, who's been integral in the development of a lot of our economic development work. Then we have our staff team, which is myself as executive director. We have Justin Bromberg, our manager of government relations, and Charlotte Gravlov, who is our administrative coordinator. We have an economic development committee, which is really our boots on the ground, if you will. This committee informs a lot of our advocacy. We have staff, CAOs, as CAO Wingrove sits on this committee. We have elected officials and a wide variety of stakeholders, including ministries, tourism organizations, workforce, community futures, sitting on this committee. And this committee lets us know of the pain points and concerns that are happening in our communities and in our businesses as well. And so they really help feed a lot of the information that we're hearing on the ground. Likewise, in the past 18 months, we've developed the subject matter expert groups. And these are our staff teams, staff from the 15 counties related to our strategic priorities that help inform our advocacy work. These are the professionals, these are the subject matter experts. And we are so grateful to these individuals. In Grey County on the planning team, we have Scott Taylor, who is just incredible. We have in social services, Anne-Marie Shaw, communications with Robert Hatton, and for economic development, the incredible duo of Savannah Myers and Steve Furness. And a big portion of what we do is advocacy. So our work is executed through meetings with ministers. So just this week, the chair, Glenn McNeil, and I, we met with the newest Minister of Agriculture, Food, and Agribusiness, Minister Flack. Next week, we'll be meeting with Minister Thompson, and then we'll be heading to AMO. We also write letters, financial analysis, ERO submissions, pre-budget submissions. We do a lot of writing. We monitor legislation, and we also partner with other organizations. We are a strong partner with the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, AMO, the FCM, so the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, as well as SWIFT. So digging right into those priorities, I'm sure it's no surprise that housing is number one. And the two biggest pieces of advocacy, our asks that we're heading into AMO with, are the first ask is there are two remaining pieces of development charges that were not included in Bill 185 when they reinstated several of the DC costs. And that is housing services and the cost of land as eligible development costs, charges, sorry. And with those, we would see about a $4 billion deficit over 10 years. Those two pieces not included in DCs. So we would like those to be reinstated for us. And this regarding housing infrastructure funding. So we just saw the announcement yesterday of all the water and wastewater funding announcements, and that the Building Faster funding is now going to be incorporated into that wastewater and water funding. So that answers some of the questions there, but we want to ensure that there is infrastructure funding for housing in our small and rural communities. And we can't have housing without infrastructure. They go hand in hand, and we need that infrastructure to support our communities. And with that, we've seen huge investments in Western Ontario to the tune of about $30 to $40 billion between Stellantis and LG, PowerCo with Volkswagen, Honda, and Bruce Power. And we're looking at 30,000 jobs in the region. And because we are the economic generator of Ontario, we need to ensure that the infrastructure is here to support that economic driving force that we are of the province. So we need to make sure that we are at the table for all discussions when it comes to infrastructure build out in our region. So we'll be meeting with Minister Surma for those discussions. Our third priority is workforce. You can't have housing and you don't have infrastructure if you don't have somebody to build it all. And so just yesterday, actually, we met with the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, Skills Development, and had a fantastic discussion around workforce training, skills development, and access to funding, particularly around healthcare and early childhood education. Healthcare, specifically for our long-term care homes, looking at RNs and PSWs, we know that as you get further away from the 401, the reliance on those third-party agencies increases and the cost increase for our municipalities. So we want to see more training, more funding available for healthcare sector, as well as early childhood education, because that gets people back into the workforce if we have good childcare. And last but not least is mental health, addictions, and homelessness. We'll be advocating for a dedicated rural stream of the homelessness prevention program funding. And we will be asking for permanent funding for the mobile crisis response teams. That funding has been increased from 1 to 3 years, which is a huge leap, but we want to see permanent funding. So we'll be meeting with Solicitor General Kersner to find out how we can support him in ensuring permanent funding for those for that tranche of dollars. And when it comes to broadband infrastructure, we'll also be meeting with Minister Surma to talk about the ASIP program and how that's coming along. ASIP is the provincially run program, and there's been some stalls with that program. So we're going to be looking for an update from the province on where they are with that project, because SWIFT, as we know, has far surpassed all of its goals. As I mentioned, our Economic Development Committee is fantastic and been really boots on the ground. Most recently, we're going to be taking to caucus some information on the Blue Box transition and some of the pain points there when it comes to industrial, commercial, and institutional facilities and getting people to work. And so that's what our Economic Development Committee has been looking at most recently. I'd be remiss if I wasn't here and not reminded you or mentioned that our conference, our Ontario West Municipal Conference, which Warden Milne sits on the committee for, is coming up on October 25th in Chatham. This is a fantastic day. This conference has been on hiatus since 2018. We are so pleased to be the host to bring it back. It'll be a one-day conference featuring Paul Wells, a renowned political journalist from Maclean's, the Toronto Star, the Post, a number of different outlets throughout Canada as our keynote. And then we have breakout sessions throughout the day in relation to our strategic priorities. We have early bird pricing until the September long weekend, so I encourage you to register if you can. This is open to elected officials and staff. As I mentioned at the outset, some accomplishments we've made in the last 12 to 18 months of that working together, that the power and working together. Back about a year and a half ago, some federal members of parliament reached out when there was that the federal riding redistribution plan. And we were looking at possibly losing a seat, a rural seat in Western Ontario. And we were able to work with our federal counterparts and ensure some advocacy around that. And we kept that rural seat in Western Ontario. We also were able to advocate to the province when they proposed legislation to allow up to 3 severance lots off of every farm in Western Ontario. And with that, there would have been the opportunity to lose up to about 750,000 acres of farmland in the province if that had gone through, or sorry, in Western Ontario alone, if that had gone through. So we advocated quickly to our ministers and MPPs on that piece of legislation. Recently, we've been advocating to the province on leave to construct threshold. So that's allowing gas pipelines. So when you're building a new facility or farm and you need a gas pipeline, right now it's a $2 million threshold, which gets you just under 500 meters of pipeline. And then it triggers an application to the OEB, which takes about 12 to 24 months investment because of those prolonged wait times having to go to the OEB. So we've successfully advocated to the province to have that leave to construct threshold increased to $10 million. We've also worked with Minister Tabolo's office on securing a community response pilot project. So that's partnering a social worker with a paramedic as a first responder, which has been a phenomenal project, and that's in Lambton County. We've also secured attendance at the Provincial Housing Forum last November. And as I mentioned, we are so thrilled to be bringing back and hosting the Western Ontario Municipal Conference. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Warden.
Sorry, it works better if the warden unmutes. Thank you very much, Kate, for that report. Very comprehensive. Are there any questions for Kate? Seeing none, I will thank Kate for her time. I can say that Kate does a wonderful job for the Western Ontario Wardens. She is very professional and does a great job of advocating and steering the advocacy to where it needs to get to. So thank you, Kate. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on with the agenda. The next is the consent agenda. Is there any request to remove any of those items for further discussion? Councillor Gregg.
Item 6B is a recommendation within the Community Services Committee minutes. I have a question regarding it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Nielsen?
6F, I think it is. Sorry, the 6D, sorry, the Canadian Building Community Fund.
Okay. So there's been a request to have those two. Anyone else? Okay, if I could have a motion to adopt the consent items, save and accept 6B and 6D. Moved by Councillor Nielsen, seconded by Councillor Carlton. Any discussion? I see Councillor Borden on. Oh, no. Okay, everybody's hands are back down. Okay, I'll call the question. Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. So now we move on to items for direction and discussion. The first one is a report regarding Grey County Paramedic Services Response Time Performance Plan for 2025. I need a mover for that motion, please. Councillor DeBreen, seconder, Councillor Hutchison. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say Director McNabb is going to take that report. Kevin, welcome. Floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Warden and County Council. I'm just going to share my screen, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Can everyone see that?
Sure can.
Okay, great. Thanks. So today we're going to talk about the Grey County Paramedics Response Time Performance Plan for 2025. So the recommendation that the 25 Response Time Performance Plan is outlined in the report be approved and submitted to the Ministry of Health, and that staff work with the municipality of Grey Highlands to secure suitable land to build a base in Feversham area to meet the recommendations of the ORH Comprehensive Deployment Review. So each year we're mandated to submit a response time plan for the upcoming year. So today's presentation will be for the 2025 operational year. The targets were originally for this plan determined in 2012. We've never increased our time since then. We've improved upon it in 2016, where we increased our percentage of time to meet the 8-minute mark for CTAS 1 from 50% to 60%. And we also reduced our time from 30 minutes to 20 minutes for CTAS 3 to 5s. Our response time targets are looking at code 4 responses or for life and threatening calls for CTAS 1 through 5, as well as our responses through to cardiac arrests. So these are our targets. The Ministry of Health sets the target for cardiac arrest response of having a defibrillator at the patient's side of 6 minutes or less, and we set the percentage, so ours is at 40%. The ministry also sets the time of CTAS 1s at 8 minutes, and ours is set at 60%. And then for CTAS 2, 3, 4, and 5, the municipality is able to set the time and the percentage locally. So for us, for CTAS 2, it's 15 minutes, 90% of the time. And CTAS 3 to 5, it is 20 minutes, 90% of the time. So this chart just shows you our response time history. It looks at last year compared to our targets, and then to June 30th this year, and as well as a 5-year average. So happy to say that in 2023, we did meet the response time targets, and so far this year, we are meeting those. In the past, we have struggled with meeting the CTAS 2 target and the cardiac arrest one, but it's something that we've been able to continue to meet these last couple of years, and also with the enhancements through RH, which we're very appreciative of. We hope to be able to even improve upon these. Also, as far as breaking down from CTAS, we also look at percentile response and average response. It gives you a good idea of, for our code 4 calls all bundled up in one look, how we do. So when we talk about 90th percentile, it's a true 9 times out of 10. So if there was 10,000 calls, you'd take the time on the 9,000th call. So for Grey County for 2023, it was 1521. And for this year to June 30th, it was 1526. And that the goal for us is we always aim towards that 15 minutes, 9 times out of 10. And then we also look at the average. It's an indicator of how the system's doing. And then just give you an idea, 745 for 2023 and 756 so far this year for the average. So this is our plan that will be submitted to the Ministry of Health with council approval. This is posted on a provincial website, and these are our targets. And again, we haven't changed these targets other than improving upon them in 2016. So based upon the response times of 2023 and our response times to June 30th, 24, the recommendations are to keep these same targets. Just to look at call volume, we're looking this year so far roughly about a 2% increase in call volume. When I was here in March, we talked about the increase in call volume was 0.64%, but when I ran the numbers again, it was 1.1. it was slightly out from when I ran the numbers, so I just wanted to qualify when I ran these numbers, it was a bit, it was 1.1% increase. This is good news. We haven't, a couple of years like this in a row is good. We're not seeing the higher call volumes that we'd seen in the past, where we're getting close to 25% over 5 years. So again, this is something that we monitor, these response times, because some years you may have a 1 or a 2, and the next year you have a 10, and then it's really good to average it out over a period of time. But it's anticipated with the ORH comprehensive deployment review and the resources that are planned for the next 10 years that we'll be able to continue and meet our response time targets in the future. And we'll be reporting these results back of 2024 in March 31st of 2025. Just the last part of this report is around the preparation to meet the plan from the comprehensive deployment review. We're looking at adding in 2025 an additional 12-hour shift in the Feversham area. ORH is predicting that if we put that car there, that we will be able to bring our 90th percentile under 15 minutes and get the Gray Highlands 90th percentile to 19 minutes. The base itself will be a template design for our future bases, and we're designing it off the new base that's currently out for tender in the Durham area. And what we're asking to do is to begin work with Gray Highlands to seek out a suitable location for the base to help us move ahead with 2025 construction. And I'll just take any questions.
There's that mute button again. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that report. Are there any questions for Kevin? Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and through you to Director McNabb. With the emergency closures that are happening more often in the last few months, have we seen any effect that has had on, quite frankly, even our calls for paramedic, where the community, clients, have no understanding whether, is the emerge open or not? Would they just jump in the car and go? Has it had an effect on our calls, increasing call volumes, where instead of putting somebody and running them to the emerge, that they've been calling the emerge? And further to that, with the emerge closers and our cars having to travel considerably farther to deliver, is that having an effect on our ability to make response times to further calls down the road?
Kevin?
I guess first off is if there's anybody in the community that has an emergency, I would suggest they call 911, and we will take them to the most appropriate hospital as soon as possible. For us, looking at this, I know when ORH looked at this of the hospital closing at night, there will be an impact to the West Grey response time. We will be monitoring that. The one thing that I can tell you, we have looked at the calls that have taken place over the last couple of months. We just more or less received information back, and there has been 97 community calls where we've responded in the community. Roughly about 40% of those went to Durham, and 60% of those went to other hospitals. There was also 22 transfers out of Durham Hospital. 3 of them would be to a higher level of care, and 19 of them would be to what we call the same level of care. So most likely moving them out of Durham because there's no admit beds. So we did look at times, and there is a demand on our system that will continue to put pressure on us. For example, the extra time that it's took for those transfers and the longer time out of hospital, we're looking roughly about 30 hours of time a month so far. And just one thing, as far as like our higher response CTAS levels of patients, we're spending an average of 12.4 minutes longer with those patients by transporting them out of a location that's not the Durham Hospital. So there is an impact to our service, and there is an impact to patients that we can see based upon 2 months of data. We look to be able to continue to monitor this. We do have working with our GIS department that's been really excellent through this to be able to, to be able to look at our data and analyze it and provide information back for people to help make decisions. We look to be able to continue that.
Thank you, Kevin. Follow up, Councillor Eccles.
Yes, interesting you would say that 30 added hours where our ambulance is going on a monthly basis and probably increasing. Would I be correct in saying an ambulance to attendance car, the whole bit, we're looking at somewhere around $500 an hour? 50% of ambulance is funded by the province, but 50% is funded by Grey County taxpayers. So, what are we looking at as far as dollar volume added on a huge annual basis to running our ambulances? Just another side effect of the atrocity of closing emerges.
Kevin?
Yeah, I see a significant impact as far as dollar value goes. We are, as part of this report that we are preparing, is a financial analysis of what it does cost us, so we can get that information back to you. But it's not about just the time per hour. It's about what it costs to add a car. It's, very expensive to add a car to a system. So if the pressures of this demand continue and that results in another car being added, it's really not the hourly rate. It's all the stuff that comes with it. It's very expensive.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Greig.
Thank you, and through you, Warden. Thanks for the report, Kevin. And it is, I think, some accolades need to go to your leadership and to your team as well for those positive numbers in the response times that are illustrated in the report before us today. I do have, on a go-forward basis, and I recognize that, and I know I spoke to it during our strategic planning process a year ago. I think long-term planning for paramedic response to an aging population serving rural needs is going to grow. That said, it's a level of service that's being provided by the county, and I do have concerns when we look at the dollars that are before us in the report about a 25, a 26, a 27, a 28 build. I can understand the needs in Feversham right now, but at what point should we, or do we need to, as a council, sit back and reevaluate the assumptions that were made in that report and associate a level of service that is affordable if dollars become an issue? And some of this was decided upon prior to the escalation of prices in Rockwood Terrace. But from the county's perspective, ultimately, we will only have so many dollars to divvy up between our needs. And we're going to have to decide on a level of service that is achievable and financially sustainable, and recognizing that for individuals who may choose to live in Big Bay, for example, or east of Tara, if there's higher health needs that drive a higher level of service, at times there is perhaps a little bit more emphasis that individuals need to recognize that they should locate themselves perhaps more so in an urban center, because living at home as we age is desired, but it can come at an additional cost to the county to provide additional paramedic services in the future.
Kevin?
Yeah, as a part of the plan, we do have a 10-year plan, but there's a phased-in approach, and that we will look at the plan, yearly. When the report came out, they had recommended 3 12-hour cars and we phased them in over 2 years. The report was finished in 2023. We'd already missed the budget cycle, so we added 2 cars in 2024, and the recommendation would be to add a car in 2025, which would be the Feversham car. And then in 2026, there is nothing added, and that'll really be giving us a time to take a look at response times and call volumes and how we're doing. So that is something that it's an ongoing evaluation and meeting the demands of the service. And we will be reporting that back. Around the bases, the bases were in addition to the original when we first met about this, and we've talked about it in the report. That when you're adding cars, we really didn't have the real estate for parking and keeping vehicles indoors. So as opposed to building on to existing bases, we found that adding bases in our more underserviced areas with the cars that we are adding, not only do we get the impact, and we saw it through the ORH modeling, that there would be a further improvement of response times in those rural areas in the county. But when we're building and need to build anyways, is to spread out those resources, because as it stands today, we would either have to build on to where we're at or build at a new location. So that was kind of the premise behind it. And but again, all this is based upon council approval.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much, Kevin, for your report. Moving on to the next report is the County Official Plan Amendment 8 regarding Park Bridge Christie Beach Merit Report. Someone care to move that, please? Councillor Kentner and Councillor Keaveney. Scott, or yeah, I see Randy. Yeah, other staff nodding their head. So yeah, Scott, it's not quite lunchtime yet, but sorry, I just can't let that go. Sorry. Scott, go ahead, please.
Great, thanks, Mr. Warden. Maybe we can rebrand the planning department here as not holding you up from lunch, but unlocking pathways to lunch or some such wording. Anyway,
always a positive perspective.
Yeah. I'll jump right in here. I'm just going to share my screen. Great. Can everyone see that? Perfect.
Yep. Thank you.
Let's jump right into it. So what we have before us today is a county official plan amendment, and the municipality of Meaford has received a similar municipal official plan amendment to redesignate approximately 135 hectares of land to the recreational resort settlement area designation. The lands are currently designated both rural and hazard lands in the county official plan and the Meaford official plan. The official plan amendments, if approved, would facilitate the construction of a new little village, which would have residential uses, commercial uses, recreational uses, and some community uses in that regard. The lands subject to the applications are generally vacant right now, with the exception of one existing dwelling. This is a very large development being proposed, and the residential proportion of this development could be up to 1,250 residential dwelling units. Those would be a mixture of single detached, multi-attached, and a few apartment units. And they're looking at as much as 25,000 square feet of retail and commercial space, in addition to, like I said, the recreational uses, the community space, and the trails and such. They've offered a servicing report alongside this development that offers some different options for servicing. One option would be to have the municipal water and sewer services extended from the existing primary settlement area of Meaford, which is about 4 kilometers to the west. One of the other options is to have the water and sewer services extended from the town of Blue Mountains, which is immediately to the east of this development. Or a third option would be to build their own treatment plants on site. So they've offered this more so as a proof of concept, but if this development were to be approved, obviously there'd be further work needed to determine which is the most viable option in that regard, and there would be environmental assessments needed and various other approvals in that regard. The proposal as it stands right now would have 2 accesses off of Highway 26 and a third access by an extension of 39th Side Road to Christie Beach Road. And so I'll just show you the lands here. So what you're seeing there in the dashed red is the subject lands. What you'll see is they are north of Highway 26. The Georgian Trail bisects the lands, which is the reason for the sort of narrow stretch along the highway, and then the further wider stretch as you get out to Georgian Bay. Just to orient yourself here, we have the county forest immediately to the west, and then to the east, just on the other side of Christie Beach Road, there's a series of developments in the town of Blue Mountains, including notably the Lower Bay development. As I said, it's about 4 kilometers to the west or 4 kilometers west from this development is downtown Meaford. And just to show you the lands they're looking at here. So what they're looking at would be in the dashed lines, and it's that sort of bright fluorescent green that they would be looking to redesignate. You have the existing hazard lands in that darker green, and then the teal color just to the north there is the existing inland lakes and shoreline settlement area. And just sort of on the edge of the screen, it's tough to see. You'll see some more of this bright green, and that's the existing recreational resort settlement area in the town of Blue Mountains in that regard. So this is a proposed concept of what the development might look like. As you can see here, there's the 2 accesses out to the highway, the 1 access out to 39th Side Road. You can see a large amount of residential uses. They're proposing a community use in here, and then the commercial will be roughly where this number 2 is. The development is technically on Georgian Bay, but to get down to Georgian Bay, there is quite a steep slope there, and there's the clay cliffs there. So it's not it's not sort of at water level whereby the residents of this could have boat launches or anything directly into the bay in that regard. But they are proposing trails and possibly an access to Georgian Bay as some other recreational amenities in addition to some more standard amenities in that regard. We're still at the very early stages. The application was actually just circulated on Tuesday of this week. We've been working closely with our friends at the municipality of Meaford to process the applications. There's been no joint public meeting scheduled yet, and we've not conducted a thorough planning analysis. The developer, in advance of submitting their applications, did have some public meetings on their own and public open houses, and certainly there was one last February to get the opinion of the public and the neighbors in this regard. As per usual, following the agency and public review processes, will provide a thorough planning analysis back to a county committee of the whole. There's certainly many policy areas we'll want to dig further into, including the policies around settlement area expansions and comprehensive reviews, servicing and transportation, working with both Municipality of Meaford and Town of Blue Mountains, as well as the Ministry of Transportation in that regard, will be crucial. We want to look at the appropriate housing levels and density levels in that regard, as well as the environmental and archaeological resources. Now, one of the main reasons we decided to put this one on the for discussion agenda versus the consent agendas is not just based on the size of this proposed development, but also to flag some interactions between this proposed official plan amendment and some changes that are in the draft 2024 provincial planning statement. So we still don't have a finalized version of the provincial planning statement, but going by the draft that was released earlier this year, there are some key changes that might have an impact to how we at the county and how our friends at the municipality of Meaford would review this development. More specifically, the PPS proposes to remove the need for comprehensive review. So for those that might not have a planning policy at the tip of their brains, comprehensive reviews up until today have been required anytime you look to establish a new settlement area or expand a settlement area. And it looks at the need for that expansion. It looks at the suitability of the lands for growth. And then it looks at infrastructure needs like road access and servicing and everything else. And the other key consideration here is if the draft provincial planning statement were to pass as proposed today, it makes a shift in that it would require municipalities to use the Ministry of Finance's 25-year population and employment growth forecast rather than using the county's own 2021 growth management strategy forecasts. And on the one hand, there may be some benefit to every municipality in the province singing from the same hymn book, so to speak, and using numbers that are provincially generated. On the other hand, at the very least, in this interim state, we've done some initial analysis to compare the ministry's numbers versus the county's numbers from 2021. And there is a significant difference, particularly on the population side. The ministry is projecting approximately 19,000 more people coming to Gray up until the year 2046 versus what the county had projected in our 2021 study. So just to break that down, the county study had projected by 2026, the county as a whole would be at about 127,000 permanent residents versus the ministry is projecting for that same period 146,000 permanent residents. So it does have a bearing on how we plan, not just in terms of documents like our official plans, but also in the need for infrastructure planning, what we consider within our county and municipal development charges, studies, and background information in that regard. So we wanted to flag this for County Council. It was flagged when we submitted comments on the draft PPS, but we're seeing potentially a very real example of how these PPS policies might impact development applications. And the draft transition policies for the PPS speak to the fact that any decision made after the PPS is passed would have to be consistent with the new PPS, regardless of whether that application was submitted before the PPS came into effect. And the developer has acknowledged that in their background studies and technical work to say that, you know, in all likelihood, by the time the county and the municipality of Meaford get around to making a decision here, we could be dealing with that new policy framework. Obviously, it remains to be seen whether or not there'll be further changes to the draft PPS, but we did want to flag this. And stepping away from this application directly, this change to using the Ministry of Finance numbers may necessitate some rethinking at the county and municipal levels with respect to our own official plans, and might also trigger some further study, maybe with a consultant to zero in on those growth management numbers, because while the province tells us that the county as a whole might be growing by an additional 19,000 people beyond what we had projected, they only give us those numbers at the county level. So there could still be the need to further break that out into assessing what each of our 9 member municipalities are looking at in terms of those growth forecasts for that same time period. So we haven't taken any action just yet, and we're thinking there might be a future staff report to County Council once we see that that finalized version of the PPS in terms of what might be the most prudent way to move forward for the county and our member municipalities as it comes to potentially updating our official plans in that regard. But with that, and just getting back to the application before us, the recommendation on this one is that Committee of the Whole receive the report and that we work with the municipality of Meaford to ultimately schedule a joint public meeting to hear feedback from the public and agencies, and later on receive detailed recommendations from staff on these applications. So that's what I have for now, and I certainly be happy to take any questions through the warden if there are any.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the report. Are there any questions for Scott? Councillor Eccles.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden, to Scott. The Minister of Finance, I just find it difficult because we supply most of the numbers that make up those projections. How is there so much variance? Like, is the actuaries on a different formula than what we're projecting, or just how is it that it's out that much? I find that difficult.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for your question, Councillor Eccles. That's something that staff have been trying to look into as well. When we did our growth management strategy with Hempson in 2020 and 2021, we looked at all available data at that time, including the Ministry of Finance projections for the day at that time. And where Hempson came out with their projections versus where the ministry was very, very close. So back in sort of 2020, 2021, we were almost bang on. And so the question is now, how have we changed, or how have we diverged so drastically? And we've reached out when staff noticed this, when the draft PPS was released, we reached out to county planning directors across the province to say, is Gray a unicorn here? Are you guys seeing major changes as well? And in many, many cases, not all, but in many cases, they were seeing drastically higher population projections as well. So I think if the PPS does pass similar to the draft, I think it's something that we'd want to chat with both ministry staff on, and maybe somebody like a Hempson who in the past has done our growth management work and our development charges work, to understand why those numbers are so different. And from a development charges perspective, the worry is that if we overestimate the amount of growth that we think are coming, and we plan the financing of our capital projects based on that anticipated growth, if we don't get that anticipated growth, then it's left us in a bit of a financial deficit in terms of that development charges income coming in. And similarly at the municipal level, if you're planning your infrastructure upgrades based on X number of growth, you want to be pretty certain that that's fairly close, so that you're not overbuilding or over designing in that regard. So very long-winded answer, but great question, Councillor Eccles, and it's something we want to dig into further with those in the know.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Scott, just from the conversation we're having, is the increase in numbers and the provincial policy statement kind of putting us into a situation where more and more development or more density is being kind of pushed on the county? It seems like the way it's being worded is we have to follow the provincial policy statement, which is saying we want the growth in housing numbers, and then they're projecting larger growth than we were expecting, which is almost kind of putting us into this bit of a cyclical, hey, we're going to send a bunch of people your way and you're not going to be able to say no. Is that a general feeling I'm getting, or am I misreading the room?
Scott?
Through you, Mr. Warden, thank you for your question, Councillor Nielsen. It's a good point. I may be splitting hairs on words here. I wouldn't say the growth is being pushed on the county. The county, even in our recent growth management strategies, has known that growth is coming. We've seen in terms of development applications and interest in tourism and various other things, there is more awareness of Gray, and we've heard anecdotally that all those sort of communities and counties within a 2-hour reach of the GTA are seeing more rapid growth than they were, say, 10 years ago, kind of thing. The province is saying through this that we need to sort of use their numbers versus ours. But I wouldn't necessarily say they're pushing that growth on us. I think that growth was coming anyway, and it might be a difference of professional opinion as to how much growth will be coming. But I think we need to understand these numbers to, as I said, understand how to plan for infrastructure and other needs in that regard. Going forward, there could be some efficiencies in this method in that if the province is setting one rationale or one methodology for how they're projecting this growth, it might serve to deflate those that would choose to argue with a county growth projection in that regard, because we're all going by the same methodology. But certainly in this interim, whereby we're potentially comparing our numbers versus theirs, it puts us in a spot of difficulty in terms of trying to understand how to adjust accordingly. Hope that answered your question, Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Warden Milne, and through you. I just, for quite a little while, have been very skeptical about the county's numbers. And what I would say to you is that for 60 years, I've watched the march of the GTA to Georgian Bay, and that's only accelerating. And what I find is a lot of the municipalities that are earmarked for housing quotas, such as Sarnia and Thunder Bay, I don't hear people saying, I just can't wait to move to Sarnia. People want to live on Georgian Bay. and they want to just that they can see themselves. They've been coming here for years, and they can see themselves moving here when they don't have to work in Toronto anymore. I think it's pretty much inevitable, and I see the province's figures as much more realistic, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Okay, any further questions regarding the recommendation? And I will bring us back to the recommendation. We're not going to continue to go off onto provincial stuff. Okay, not seeing any further questions. I will ask the question. Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes the reports that require discussion and direction. So I'll bring us back to the first consent agenda item that was pulled by Councillor Gregg, which was 6B regarding Community Services Committee minutes. Councillor Gregg, would you move receiving of that, or what are you proposing, sir?
I would defer perhaps to the committee chair to move as my question is just regarding the discussion that was potentially had.
Okay. Councillor Matrosas, will you move the receiving of those minutes? Oh, I got the wrong person for the chair.
Councillor Nielsen.
Councillor Nielsen, I apologize. Councillor Nielsen, you will do that. Thank you. Is there a seconder of that motion? Councillor Dickert, thank you. So back to you, Councillor Gregg, for question.
Thank you, Warden. Boy, my thoughts are all over the place here because it's such a complex discussion regarding the opioid crisis that is in front of all communities now, and the AMO paper that was part of the recommendation. It wasn't quite clear to me, perhaps, when I was going through the minutes. I know I asked a year ago, is the county playing a role in providing any drugs to individuals that could potentially be rerouted to other individuals in the community? Because we do see an increasing acknowledgement that occurs with, I believe they call it safe supply. And I struggle with, I just hope that there's nothing here that is having us travel that direction without a more fulsome discussion. I would hate to ever be in a position of losing a loved one and then discovering it was essentially government funded drug provision that ended up into ending the life of someone close to anyone. We see it in Owen Sound. Certainly we are the regional center that has so many services that are provided. I see it because I've worked downtown for 18 years. Will engage anyone aside from social workers that are involved at that level of engagement with individuals, but I see it every day, the impacts. I've seen over years how individuals become physically and mentally, essentially impediments are created. And I just wonder about the ethic component here. It did speak about ethics in the AMO report. We're all aware, if you go back to the 60s, 70s, physiological testing was done in Scandinavian countries, whereas it was not done on people in North America because of ethics. So I'm just wondering, are we changing a path, or are we just advocating at this point within that document? And by changing a path, I'm referring to that question that I posed a year ago and the response I was given that no, we do not provide drugs to individuals that could potentially be rerouted. I've seen evidence of the underground economy in my business, where I've sold footwear to individuals, only that it's gone the next day. And that's not just story making. I've had the police chief in my store at the time of providing that service and completing the sale. And these are individuals who are certainly very troubled and have been troubled for years. It does note in the report, I'm trying to bounce back and forth. Municipalities are aware of the need, but municipalities have no possible means of funding the need, and that it has to come from the province and the federal governments to support the need. And if we are deviating from the current process, being in Owen Sound where we are significantly impacted, there are tremendous challenges going on in our downtown. Buildings have been vacated by businesses after recently one after 75 years of being located downtown. Essentially a pillar it was for a couple generations, and has moved outside of the downtown because of the difficulties. So if we're changing direction, what type of consultation is being undertaken with stakeholders in the community as well? Because businesses are not able to speak up, and those businesses could be banks, they could be service providers, they could be retailers, but they are most certainly feeling the impacts of the problems or the challenges that the opioid crisis has created. Staff are doing a great job of servicing it, but I'm just wanting to be clear from those minutes and the recommendation there. Is it all just in relation to AMO advocacy, or is it a bit of a twofold recommendation?
Wow, there's a lot there. Anne Marie, do you or who would like to know? Okay.
I believe it was
Oh, Kevin?
Kevin that did the report. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Kevin, do you want to respond, please?
Yeah, I would say here in Grey County, we are like a lot of other municipalities across the province. It's not isolated to Grey. You see it in rural areas, but we also see it in smaller cities and large cities. The opioid crisis due to the illicit drug supply being so toxic, and this supply is killing people daily. We're seeing overdoses daily, and I think what the AMO report, and I know what the AMO report is talking about, is that the approaches that what we have today are not working, and where people are still suffering from this. So from the report, we looked with AMO, and what we'd like to do is be able to bring back plans about what some further things that we can do, treatments in the community to hopefully reduce the number of overdoses and reduce the number of deaths. I believe when you speak about diversion of these medications into the community. That is a concern, but we would want to watch that and look at that and study that to ensure that we do whatever we can to prevent that. But these are balanced approaches between death and then also exposure of these drugs to the public. So these are difficult conversations. I think that for us to implement anything would be, definite community consultation and bringing back through county council as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other questions regarding that particular recommendation? Okay. Kevin, I see your hand still up. McNabb, are you okay? You're good. All right. So I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to receiving this? Not seeing any, I'll call that carried. The next report that was pulled was the 6D, which is concerning the Canada Community Building Agreement recommendation, and that was Councillor Nielsen. Councillor Nielsen, are you prepared to move receiving of that?
I have no problem moving the receiving of that.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bordenau, thank you very much. Councillor Nielsen.
Thanks, Warden Milne. Just wanted to share some conversation that happened at the Greyhounds Council table yesterday regarding the Canadian Building Fund, Community Building Fund. There was a notice of motion passed at Greyhounds table yesterday regarding kind of a fair approach to how to divvy out the funds from this, and to kind of once again try to lobby AMO and Roma to help us get a better representation for rural communities. I'll just read you a small portion of what the notice of motion said, just to share with County Council, just so that our membership is aware. Whereas rural municipalities often have small populations while governing larger geographic areas that are often result in more significant kilometers of roads to construct and maintain. And whereas much of rural municipalities' roads play a crucial role in the movement of vehicular traffic throughout Ontario, resulting in wear and tear on rural roads, most often from more populous municipalities. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of Municipality Greyhounds move to forward and advocate for fair, relevant, and relatable funding for rural municipal road networks that appropriately reflect the needs of rural municipalities. So I just wanted to share that with Grey County Council today. It's going to be forwarded on to AMO, Roma, and our goal is to try to get it to all the rural municipalities within Ontario.
Thank you, Councillor Nielsen. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, I'll declare that carried. We do have a closed meeting matter. Do we want to have a recess for a few minutes, or are we good to keep going? This shouldn't take too long. I mean, that's famous last words, of course. But I don't see anybody wanting to recess, so I'll read the motion that the Committee of the Whole does now go into closed session pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land, more specifically early on redevelopment. Someone care to move that, please? Councillor Dickert, seconded by Councillor Pringle. Anyone opposed? That is carried. So I'll just give Olivia a moment to deal with the video.
Yes, one moment, please.